Good morning and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. Today's video is all about growing ground cherries. So if this is something you're interested in, then let's get started. So I've gotten very many requests about how to grow ground cherries. It's a type of
Physalis pruinosa or Physalis peruviana. And these here are a native variety here in Ontario called Physalis heterophylla, clammy ground cherry.
Another name for these are Cape Gooseberries, but these are not in the gooseberry family. Gooseberries are perennial shrubs, whereas these are annual. Basically they're like tomatoes because they're in the tomato family. They grow like tomatoes. All the Physalis are in the tomato family and the nightshade family. So because they're in the nightshade family, you don't eat them green. Anyway, how you grow them is these are much more slow growing than tomatoes and even than peppers and eggplant. I mean, they're slow to germinate and they're just slow to grow at the beginning. Once they get to a certain size, that's when they grow really fast. And they've almost reached that size. It's June 25th today. I sowed these, if I recall correctly, it was sometime in March. I probably could have waited until April. I may have sown these in April actually, with at the same time as my tomatoes. Some of them I sowed at the same time as my peppers, and others I sowed at the same time as my tomatoes. But they're all doing about the same thing because they require a lot of heat to germinate, and so they took well over a month, and in some cases 2 months to germinate. That's why I say I could have sown them later when it was getting hotter in the greenhouse and so on. Some of them I sowed indoors in March, and then the others I sowed in April when it started to warm up. So I've waited until they get big enough, because if you transplant them too small and they're so slow growing, you're going to have too much weed work to do. You're going to have to keep the weeds down. And so the way to have success with ground cherries is to let them grow to a certain size. And like I said, this size is pretty good. I could let these grow bigger, but the thing is, the bigger you want to let them grow, the bigger your pot has to be, because you don't want them to be too stressed in too small of a pot. Some of mine I started in real tiny pots, and so I had to transplant into bigger pots. Others I started in bigger pots, and so there's no transplanting needed. They just take up more space when you're starting them. And so because you're transplanting them when they're a good, nice size, then all you need to do is clear out the area you're going to transplant them into, and they're already such a good size that they're going to shade out the weeds. And when they also get to this size, that's when they start to grow more quickly. And obviously, anytime you transplant a plant, it's going to take several days up to even a week before it does anything, because its roots are reestablishing into their new home. And the other important thing about transplanting anything is to harden it off first. As you can see, these are in full sun, and they've been in full sun now for a week. And prior to that, I had them up against an eastern-facing wall, where they were only getting sun in the morning. And when I started hardening them off so that they wouldn't get a really hot sun, and that was a couple of weeks ago when it wasn't even as hot. It was, we're talking about early June. And the other thing is, when you transplant them, it's best to wait for a cloudy or even a rainy day, because that'll be less stressful for them. And if you don't have a cloudy or rainy day, if it's a full sun day like today and up to 40 degrees Celsius outside, I think that's close to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you don't want to transplant these in that type of weather. You'd have to transplant them early morning when it's cool, or in the evening when it's cool. I'm planning on transplanting these in a couple days. I've got some rain coming up in a couple days, and so I'm hoping to transplant them either under the clouds or even under a rain. I don't really mind working under the rain, especially when the weather's really hot. So there you go. And then you can give them a tomato cage, but they get really gigantic, so they'll outgrow their tomato cage. And some branches will grow along the ground. That's not really a problem, but the central the central trunk, let's say, can get really, really thick, and so they can really stand well. Once you've gotten them to this point and transplanted them, you've cleared the weeds away, then you're doing really well. If I get a chance, I'll videotape that portion of it. It's a couple of days later. Perfect, beautiful, cloudy day. Perfect day for transplanting. So I'm going to transplant these ground cherries into the ground. And they're a really nice size now. And they're really ready to transplant. Nicely hardened off. So I'm going to get these into the ground right away. It's the end of June. And so there's not a whole lot of space left in the garden, but there are a few empty spots that these things are going to be able to fill in.
I start giving explanations again at the 7:34 mark if you want to skip over this part. I just thought it was nice to listen to the birds while transplanting.
As you might have noticed while I was digging the hole, the ground is very, very dry. We've had no rain in about 2 weeks at least. No real rain. But I think there's got a big rain coming tomorrow. So yeah, the ground is dry and hard. Now I've found a few little holes in the garden areas that I can work with. I have some anise hyssop here that I cut back, and I'm just gonna bring it inside so we can use it in the kitchen. Over there where I also made some space, I had some yarrow that I cut back and I put it at the base of some native ground cherries that are having some issues with bugs. The yarrow is gonna help them along. And then right here on this side, I've got a big bunch of oregano, which is doing really well. And I'm just gonna have to make sure that I cut it back so it doesn't grow on top of the ground cherry, which is fine because I'll be harvesting it for the kitchen. And in the meantime, it's going to be helping the ground cherry along because it's gonna keep away the pests. Let's continue. Now I'm gonna plant, I've got not a huge space here. This is probably about 4 square feet, about a square meter maybe. No, a bit less than a square meter, between 4 square feet and a square meter. And I think I'm gonna put about 4 of these plants, and what they're gonna do is they're all gonna grow up like this, and their branches are gonna mix in together. And so they're gonna help hold each other up, because generally ground cherries can sometimes get really big, and it's too big for a cage. Trellises, I mean, they just grow everywhere, and so often their branches will just kind of like fall down to the ground. But I prefer them to be up, and if they're planted together and their branches crisscross, it's a little easier to help keep the branches up. Oh, and right here in front, this is something I'm not cutting back because this is some parsley that I had growing last year, and now it's going to flower. So we're gonna get seeds from it, which is really, really nice because I haven't collected parsley seeds yet. And so I'm going to be able to collect a bunch of parsley seeds this year because I've got a whole bunch of these parsleys that are going to flower. But they're not going to shade out the ground cherry. They don't have, once they go to flower, they're not very, they don't grow very thickly. And also I'll be cutting them back as soon as I've got their seeds. Because there's been no rain, I like to put a whole bunch of water in the hole in preparation to put the plant. There we go. Very, very ready. Make sure my hole's deep enough. It's okay to bury some of the stem. It'll just grow roots along the stem, which is good. There we go. These ground cherries that I'm planting are from seed that I collected from ground cherries that I harvested here in our main sun garden that were volunteers. So they're fruit that had fallen in the fall of 2023, plants that grew in 2024 without me having to plant them. And I harvested them, collected some seed because they were really, really good, and now I'm planting them. 2025. The other thing is these plants are going to get really, really big. They're going to get so big that they're going to be bigger than the oregano on this side, and they're going to be putting the pressure up against the hyssop on this side and up against the parsley over here. But by the time they get that size, the parsley will have already given me its seed, and so I'll be able to cut it away. I've already taken 2 harvests from this anise hyssop, and so it'll go to flower, and it'll go to flower through the ground cherries, and so that's just going to be pretty. And the oregano will be starting to kind of finish up for the season when these things get really, really big. They'll be really, really big in about September, and then their big harvest is October, end of September, beginning of October. There's some harvest in early September, but it's mostly late because they're so slow growing. Today I'm going to cut back some of this oregano as well. That's growing really close to the ground cherries. Bring it to the kitchen. It's a cloudy day, so harvest it and just leave it here for now. That should be good for now. When it starts to get close again, I'll cut some more. That's a nice amount of oregano. Very nice. I don't know if you can see the mosquitoes flying around my face, but they're not landing on my face because I rubbed myself down on my face earlier with some catnip. Got another little spot right here, right beside where they were. This is the yarrow I was telling you about that I cut back. And I've got some popping sorghum here and some barley right here. Got a bit of a space here with some little onions growing. Ground cherry is good at growing amongst other plants. It's able to rise up in and amongst other plants. So long as you get it when it's at a good size. This one here has 2 plants in it, but I can keep both. They'll just grow together. Early morning on a cloudy day as I weed my watermelon patch and basil patch of all the little weeds. Many things I discover are ground cherry volunteers, because this is where I also let the ground cherries grow. And they're really small right now, so they're not causing a problem of the watermelons, and they're only going to become big when the watermelons are ripening, and so that will be just fine. So I'm gonna let these ground cherry volunteers stay. There are a whole bunch of them. It's June 30th today, I think. They're just starting to appear a bit everywhere. Because of course many ground cherries fell to the ground and I didn't get them. So this patch in the fall will be full of ground cherries after the watermelon are finished ripening. I hope you liked the video. Hope you learned something from it. If you enjoyed it, then please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And don't forget to leave a comment below or a question. I love to answer your questions and to respond to your comments. And if you haven't done so yet, then subscribe to our channel. Support what we do here just by subscribing. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.